Jaylen Brown in MVP mode. Draymond Green dropped this. Celtics. If you're a Celtics fan, you know that feeling. Jaylen Brown destroys, decides the game, and yet it seems like no one out there takes him seriously in the MVP conversation. It makes you angry, right? Now hold this. Draymond Green said what many people don't have the courage to say, and his opinion became a topic throughout the NBA. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what he said, what it changes in Jaylen's narrative, and why this could be the push that Brown needed to enter the MVP conversation once and for all. Let's go. Before I show you Draymond's speech, quickly, if you like Celtics and NBA without any nonsense, subscribe now because we're in the race to reach 1,000 subscribers. And this goal really helps the channel to grow, to deliver the videos to more people, and for us to be able to bring you more content more frequently. And I'm going to ask you a favor from fan to fan. Leave a like now because it pushes the video on YouTube, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next Celtics news and analysis. Did it close? So stay with me until the end, because what he said has a detail that almost no one is talking about, and that changes everything. Let me talk to you like I would talk to a friend who follows the Celtics closely and feels things in their chest. Because there are moments in the season when we're not just talking about basketball, we are talking about recognition, respect, narrative, how the story is told. And at the beginning of January 2026, I have a question that won't leave my head. How come there is still doubt about what Jaylen Brown is doing? I know that when you hear MVP talk, the first impulse is to think about that ready-made script that they try to push every year. One name is already stamped, another appears as an alternative, and the rest remain there, orbiting. And then Jaylen Brown is in Boston, wearing green, having a season that honestly any other franchise would be showing on a billboard, and yet they still treat it as if it were cool, and that but is what bothers me. Because the but usually doesn't have to do with basketball. It has to do with custom, with preference, with laziness to see. What he's playing isn't just a good time. It's not just a sequence that you take a cut and say, look how hot it is. It is a clear transformation of posture, of responsibility, of presence. It's as if he understood that there is a type of respect that only appears when you stop asking for permission and simply take the space. And he took it. The Celtics needed it. The context asked for it. And Jaylen responded the way the greats respond, with constancy, with impact, and with that feeling, game after game, that the game passes through his hands. Then you tell me, but he was always an all-star, he was always good. Yes, he was always good, but there is a step between being good and being inevitable. And Jaylen Brown today is inevitable. When the ball goes to him, you feel like something is going to happen. It's not just about the punctuation, although it is there, heavy, present, repeated like clockwork. It's about the type of basket he makes, the moment he makes it, the weight it has. It's that attack that stops. That moment when the opponent stops, the crowd gets restless, and he goes there and solves it as if it were the most natural way in the world. And now comes the part that connects me with you, because I know what it's like to support the Celtics and feel that often the conversation outside always comes with hidden resistance. You can even call it a pet peeve. You can call it a narrative. You can call it everyone hates Boston. The name doesn't matter so much. What matters is experience. It seems that for the Celtics, everything needs to be tried twice. It seems that when the player is ours, there is always a caveat ready, and this is not victimism, it's observation. You turn on a program, open a social network, watch a discussion, and realize that the subject always slips away from the merits. And then we return to the central point. What else does Jaylen Brown need to do to be treated like a real candidate? Because if the season were a test, he has already given all the answers. Not only is he scoring, he's scoring efficiently. He is not only producing, he is sustaining production. He's not just showing up, he's leading. And leadership in basketball is not a pretty speech in the locker room. Leadership is being available, taking the ball when the game gets tough, making the right decision repeatedly, holding the team back when the tide changes. And there is one detail that for me is decisive. When the Celtics were without Jason Tatum, a lot of people, and I include myself in this, were left with a flea behind their ears. Not because we doubt the squad, but because the NBA is cruel. You lose a superstar, and usually you pay the price. The team fluctuates, the identity shakes, the attack loses reference, and the question one was simple. Who holds it? Who turns the axis? Who becomes the face of the team when the night gets heavy? And Jaylen Brown responded in practice. He did not respond with a promise. He responded with play. And that changes everything. Because there's a huge difference between being a second shining star next to someone and being the guy who handles the project when the other person isn't there. There are people who only work when the opponent's attention is divided. There are people who only fit when the system is complete. And there are people who, when the system breaks, turn the system around. That's what Jaylen has been at many times. He became the Celtics' gravitational center. And then a curious thing happens. When a player does this silently, the narrative takes a while to catch up. But this time, the narrative began to be pushed by voices that no one can ignore. And that is very important. Because at the end of the day, Celtics fans can shout, they can defend, they can bring numbers, they can show video, and there will still be people saying it's clubbing. Now, when a guy like Draymond Green stops and says, hey, what he's doing is top of the league stuff, that changes the tone. Because Draymond is not someone who usually gives out praise as if it were a toast. He often speaks of a tough, competitive place, of someone who knows playoff basketball, of someone who has been at the center of the greatest pressure. When Draymond points out that Jaylen is playing at a level that is not just two sides of the court, but a better player now, that is more than a compliment. It's a stamp. It's someone saying, I'm seeing what you're seeing, and the rest of the world needs to stop pretending they're not. And the strongest thing is that he doesn't speak like someone who is exaggerating to create a headline. He speaks like someone who is uncomfortable with inconsistency. He speaks like someone who doesn't understand how Jaylen isn't being put at least at the top of the conversation. And I'll tell you, the thing that moves me most about this story is precisely this inconsistency. Because basketball deep down is simple. You deliver, you are recognized. You load, you get credit. However, in practice, the conversation game is more complicated. The conversation has an owner, it has preference, it has momentum, it has fashion. And Jaylen Brown is trying to get into a room where they seem to have put a rope on the door. He's knocking from the inside, as if he's already there, and yet they act as if he needs to present an invitation. And then Gilbert Arenas appears, who is another figure who doesn't mince words. Arenas is that type of guy who, when he changes his opinion, doesn't pretend he always thought the same. He takes over. And when he admits he was wrong about Jaylen being his first choice, it has value because it reveals a real change in perception. It's not a polite compliment. It's an admission that what's happening on the court is too powerful to ignore. And Arenas uses an image that honestly sticks in your head. He talks about Batman's sign, and that's it. Because for a long time, they painted Jaylen as a luxury supporting character. And it's no disrespect to say he was a supporting character. It's just the role that the narrative designed. The problem is when this narrative becomes a cage. When you do everything to escape the cage and they still treat you as if you were part of the scenery. But now, when the team needed someone to take responsibility, it wasn't the traditional Batman who was available. And Jaylen went there and held the flashlight. This has a huge impact on the Celtics as a project, because when Tatum comes back and the team is whole, what remains is not, we're back to normal. What remains is, now we have two guys who can steer the ship. And that changes the way the opponent scores, changes the way the games are designed, changes the confidence of the squad. The Celtics are harder to break because they don't depend on a single flow to survive. This season is simultaneously building an individual narrative for Jaylen and strengthening the team's collective ceiling. And then you add that to the voice of Paul Pierce, who is a living symbol of what it means to carry the Celtics on your back on big nights. Pierce has that direct, almost irritated way of someone who looks and says, "Can't you see?" And when a Celtics legend reinforces the idea that there is resistance to recognizing Boston, I don't read it as drama. I read it as someone who has been there and recognizes the signs. He knows how it works. He knows how much green weighs, for better or for worse. And in the midst of all of this, the question I have for you is, are we seeing a season that will be remembered as the season in which Jaylen Brown reached another level, and the rest of the league will only recognize it later? Because this happens. It happens to players who explode, and because they don't fit the ready-made mold, it takes a while to become a consensus. However, if there is ever a time for consensus to arrive, it is now. Because we're not talking about a flash. We are talking about Kant's delivery before. We're talking about a guy who, in a lot of games, seems to be playing with a mission. And mission is a dangerous term, because it may sound exaggerated, but those who follow it closely understand. There are players who enter the court to meet the schedule. There is a player who comes in to execute, and there are players who come in as if they want to tell a story. Jaylen, as it is, seems to be telling a story. He's saying, I'm not just part of the squad, I'm one of the pillars of the league. And that, for me, is the heart of the MVP debate. It's not just who has the best package of numbers, is the one who is defining what the season means. And when I look at the Celtics in the East, the fact that the team remained at a high level even without a fundamental piece for a period, I can't separate that from Jaylen, because you can talk about the system, the coach, the collective defense, the deep squad, and all of this exists. But there is also that factor that you don't put in a spreadsheet, the presence that calms, the basket that stabilizes, the energy that is contagious. And that, in many moments, was Jaylen Brown. I know that there are people who like to put the discussion on a cold path, as if they were just going to compare candidates and that's it. But the MVP is, yes, a conversation about narrative. And if it's about narrative, then Jaylen's narrative is one of the strongest we have now. A player who was already a star, who was often underestimated, who faced criticism, who dealt with the shadow of being alongside another great star, and who is now living in a period in which he can't be treated as a supporting player. He is being the protagonist. And you can see this even in the way defenses react. The marking weighs heavily, the focus increases, the scouting comes prepared, and even so he finds his way. He gets to the comfort zone, he punishes mismatches, he attacks space, he creates contact, he finishes. And when he doesn't finish, he finds a partner. That's offensive maturity. That's what separates the guy who scores from the guy who controls the game. And there is one point that I think we need to talk about honestly. Part of the resistance comes from the past. Jaylen spent years being seen as an incredible athlete, but always that but. And the but was a collection of doubts. Reading, creating, consistency, decision-making. And I'm not saying he didn't have areas to improve, had, like any player. But at some point, the but becomes an excuse for not updating your opinion. And then you're stuck with an old portrait of a player who has already changed. If you're still using the version of Jaylen from 2-3 years ago to discuss Jaylen now, you're discussing someone else. And that's what I feel is happening in part of the debate. They're discussing a Jaylen who no longer exists. Meanwhile, the real Jaylen is producing against the best basketball in the world, against the best defenses, under pressure, in a heavy Celtics shirt, and yet it seems like he needs to prove himself every night as if it were his debut. And then, I come back to the connection with you, because cheering is also that. It's seeing your guy do everything and feeling that recognition doesn't come with it. And then the fan asks, what else? And I think the what else from Jaylen is precisely what he is delivering. He is making it so clear that the debate will become embarrassing if they continue to ignore it. There will come a point where it will no longer be a matter of opinion. It will be a matter of honesty. And the most interesting thing is that even if he doesn't win the award, this season has already had a profound effect on the Celtics, because she redefines the team's ceiling. It takes away the burden of depending on one. It creates a scenario in which when you reach the playoffs, you have a pair that can alternate dominance, and that is a nightmare for any opponent. And at the same time, she puts Jaylen in a place of internal and external respect that changes how his career will be told. I'm telling you this with the kind of excitement that comes when you feel like you're seeing something special live. You know when you watch it and realize that you'll remember that phase in a few years? What are you going to say, I saw when he turned around? I feel it. I feel like this beginning of 2026 is kind of a dividing line for Jaylen Brown. There is a Jaylen before this phase, and there is a Jaylen after. And if you're with me here on the Celtics Talk Show, I want you to take this into the comments, but not as an empty fight. I want you to bring argument, bring feeling, bring what you are seeing. Do you think he is being ignored? Do you think the league has staying power with Boston? Do you think Jaylen is in fact at the top of the conversation level? Or do you think there is still something missing for the narrative to close? I really want to hear it, because this discussion isn't just about an award. It's about recognizing greatness when it's happening in front of us. And to close this idea with the strength it deserves, I leave the image. Imagine this Celtics with Tatum back, but with Jaylen taking to the playoffs, the experience of having been the main engine for weeks, of having carried the load, of having taken a hit and responded, of having understood that he can command. This isn't just good for him. This is gold for Boston. This is the kind of thing that turns a very good team into a team that knows exactly who it is. So, breathe and tell me, do you also feel that we are experiencing Jaylen Brown's best basketball? Do you also feel like the MVP conversation urgently needs updating? Because I look at all of this and think, if the league isn't ready to call Jaylen a real candidate, Jaylen is ready to make the league call. And the difference between asking and forcing is exactly what great people do when they understand that their time has come. And that's why I'm going to close with a very simple idea. If the NBA still doesn't want to put Jaylen Brown at the center of the conversation, then he's going to do what he always does when people doubt him. He's going to play in a way that makes the doubt embarrassing. Because what we are seeing is not a good phase. It's a guy taking over the Celtics, dictating the pace, deciding the game, and putting his own name on the table without asking for permission. And when a player reaches this point, it's not the media that chooses whether he becomes an issue. It's the court that forces everyone to talk. Now, if you want to go even deeper into this and understand what's behind what the Celtics are building, I left the Celtics analysis playlist in the pinned comment. Click there after this video, because there I break down everything: adjustments, fits, strengths, points of attention, and how this team can become even more dangerous when it is complete. So do it like this. Finish here with me, go to the pinned comment, and go to Celtics Analyses. Because if you think this is just news, you haven't seen the whole story yet.